At Fairmont Crest, there comes a moment when wealth can no longer shield anyone. When elegance turns into nothing more than a fragile mask hiding fear, heartbreak, and the slow collapse of everything a family once believed could never be broken. As Anita's condition continues to worsen, the Dupree family is pulled into one of the darkest and most emotionally devastating chapters they have ever faced. This is no longer just a health crisis. It is the beginning of a reckoning, one that threatens to expose every buried wound, every strained relationship, and every painful truth that has been held in silence for far too long. Anita is not simply another family member in decline. She is the emotional core of the Dupree family, the woman whose strength, dignity, and presence have long held everyone together even when everything around them seemed ready to fall apart. As that strength begins to fade, the emotional balance of the entire family begins to crumble with it. And in the middle of that storm, Bill and Donnie are drawn back into each other's orbit. On the surface, their heartfelt conversation may seem like a natural response to tragedy. Anita is suffering. The family is shaken. Their children are hurting. Under those circumstances, it would make sense for Bill and Donnie to set aside the past and come together for the people they love. But at Fairmont Crest, nothing is ever that simple. Because beneath that quiet moment lies a storm of unfinished emotions, old betrayals, regret, and memories that neither of them has truly escaped. What looks like support may actually be the reopening of wounds that were never allowed to heal properly. What sounds like honesty may be the beginning of something far more dangerous. For Bill, Anita's worsening condition does more than break his heart. It forces him to confront the full weight of his own past in a way he may never have done before. Watching Anita grow weaker is not just painful because of who she is to the family, but because she represents everything he once had access to and everything he ultimately lost. She stood for loyalty, legacy, and the emotional center of a world he once belonged to, but slowly drifted away from through his own choices. That is what makes this moment so powerful for him. Anita's decline is no longer something he can observe from a distance. It is personal, it is devastating, and it is forcing him to realize that the family he once thought would always be there may not be waiting for him forever. For Donnie, the pain cuts in a different direction. She's no longer the woman who once waited for Bill to change. She's no longer willing to let old love erase old damage. Time has changed her, but it has not erased what happened. If anything, it has made her more aware of how much strength it took to survive the heartbreak and disappointment that once defined that relationship. Now, with Anita's condition worsening, Donnie is being forced to carry more than grief. She has to be strong for her mother, strong for her family, strong for the legacy Anita fought to protect. And at the same time, she must stand in front of a man who still knows how to stir emotions she would rather keep buried. That is what makes Bill's return to her emotional space so complicated. Because Donnie knows him, she knows when his regret is real. Because there is something almost cruel about sincerity arriving only when everything is already falling apart. And that is where the emotional danger begins, because in times of grief, people often confuse comfort with healing. They confuse shared pain with changed behavior. They confuse emotional vulnerability with the idea that the past can somehow be repaired simply because the present feels unbearable. Donnie cannot afford to make that mistake. Bill, meanwhile, may be discovering that regret is most painful when it comes too late. He may want to be present. He may want to support his children. He may even want to believe that he can stand beside Donnie again in this crisis. But wanting to help is not the same thing as earning trust. And feeling pain is not the same thing as being forgiven. As Anita's condition continues to decline, her illness becomes more than a private family tragedy. It becomes the emotional fault line running beneath everything the Duprees have built. The fear of losing her begins to expose everyone for who they really are. Some are devastated by love. Some are shaken by guilt. Some are panicked by what Anita's absence might do to the family's internal balance of power. And others may be terrified of what secrets could come to light once the woman holding so much emotional authority is no longer there to contain them. That possibility makes everything even more explosive. Because Anita was never a passive figure in this family, she was a protector, a force, a woman who understood that preserving a family sometimes required painful choices and heavy silence. If she has been holding onto a final secret connected to Bill and Donnie, then her decline could trigger not just grief, but revelation. And if that revelation comes at the worst possible time, it could change everything. It could force Donnie to question the story she has carried for years. It could make Bill realize that some of the damage between them may have been shaped by truths neither of them fully understood. It could drag their children into an emotional crisis far deeper than anyone expected. And it could turn Anita's final chapter into the very event that destroys the fragile illusions the family has been using to survive. That is why this storyline feels so intense. It is not only about whether Anita survives. It is about what happens to everyone else as they watch her fade. It is about how grief strips people down to their most vulnerable selves. It is about how fear makes old emotions rise again, even when people know better. And it is about what happens when the person who held a family together can no longer stop it from breaking apart. At Fairmont Crest, tragedy never stays simple. If Anita's condition worsens further, then Bill and Donnie's heartfelt conversation may not be remembered as a tender moment of comfort. It may become the first sign of a much bigger emotional explosion, because once grief enters the room, silence begins to crack. Regret turns into desperation, love turns into confusion, and secrets that stayed buried for years suddenly begin to feel impossible to contain. The Dupree family may be standing on the edge of one of its most painful turning points yet. Because when a woman like Anita begins to slip away, she does not leave behind only sorrow. She leaves behind questions. She leaves behind unfinished pain. She leaves behind the people who loved her, feared her, disappointed her, and depended on her, all forced to keep living while everything she held together begins to come undone. And that is what makes this moment so heartbreaking. The real danger may not be Anita's illness alone. The real danger may be what her decline is about to awaken in everyone around her.